Hello everybody and welcome to this special interview with David Smith, who I've known for a long time, and he's done a lot of training for us, but I've never actually interviewed you before, David, as you.
No, usually you're asking me to talk about some questionably fascinating piece of law.
That's right, yes. I was actually planning on doing an interview with you at our conference, but because we didn't have a proper conference. Well, I mean, we did have a proper conference, but we didn't have one where we could sit on stalls and my son could video an interview. So this is the next best thing, although I'm sure it'll be just as interesting. David, can I take you back to the beginning when you were very small? Where did you grow up, and what were you interested in school, and what were your initial interests in things?
Well, not law is the short answer. I'm not one of these people who always wanted to be a lawyer. You do meet lawyers. Like my wife, in fact, always wanted to be a lawyer from scratch. And I had no interest in it whatsoever. I went to boarding school at Westminster in London, and my parents were in business. They separated when I was 14. My father then retired and moved to France. My mother retrained as a lawyer.
Yeah,
maybe even more deserving not to be a lawyer.
She's very well known as an excellent landlord and tenant lawyer, isn't she?
She is well known in the landlord and tenant field, and her name will come back as we progress through why I became a lawyer.
Absolutely.
I actually, all of my A-levels and things were in science subjects, and I had in my head that I wanted to be a physicist.
Uh-huh.
But when I went to university, I discovered that actually I didn't like physics quite that much. It was fine at A-level, but at university they're taking it to a whole nother level that I wasn't really into. And I hummed and hawed about what I wanted to do for quite some time, and had a couple of long gap years while I wasted time trying to make up my mind.
Did you do anything interesting? Did you do any travel or anything like that?
Yeah, I've travelled all over the place. I've been to India and Mexico. I sailed across the Atlantic. I sailed around Britain a couple of times. So sailed through the Caribbean, up the east coast of America. All kinds of different and variably exciting things, provided you like exciting outdoorsy stuff.
That sounds fascinating.
It was a wide range of different stuff, and obviously had to earn some money in between to pay for all of this stuff. So there was a number of fairly uninteresting and uninspiring jobs. And I was also doing a certain amount of work with the Territorial Army as well, which helped to pay for all of this and provide other opportunities to do unusual things. But eventually I settled to go and do a degree in international relations at the University of Wales in Aberystwyth.
Okay, so that's why you've got this connection with Wales then. You were
Yeah, I did my degree there in the end, and Aberystwyth's a nice place in mid Wales, but it's very much a university town in the classic sense. There ain't much going on that's not connected to the university. It's quite hard to get anywhere from there. So it's a very closed environment, but it's obviously very exciting for that reason. You've got a lot of lecturing and after evening activities and stuff, all very connected to the university, and the international relations department there is very strong. And then after my degree, I stayed and did a doctorate as well, and became Dr. Smith. And it's really a great place to do that because, again, really sort of university connected to everything. And the Welsh National Library, which is one of the UK's 7 copyright libraries, actually sits in Aberystwyth, because Wales has this habit of trying to spread things out and not sticking everything in Cardiff and things like that. So there's actually it makes it a really great place to study, because you've got all the books there, plus a huge trove of things that people have never opened. From Wales itself. So I was my PhD was in military studies in terms of why soldiers are induced to enter combat, and what's called combat motivation theory. And I was able to find old diaries of soldiers from various wars that had almost never been opened, sitting in the Welsh Library's collections, and use some fairly interesting bits of material. And I didn't do much interviewing of individuals. I mostly picked out and surface bits of material that had never really been looked at before in this at all in any light, and looked at them in that for that reason. So that got me to,
what conclusions did you come to?
I'm not going to bore you with the history of combat motivation theory, but all combat motivation theory is based on a particular reading of the work of Sigmund Freud by some guys almost immediately after the Second World War, and I took it in a different direction by looking at Freud in a different way. But I'll stop there, because I then will talk for an hour just about that topic, and nobody will care.
Okay, well, maybe we better move into what you did after that. When you got your doctorate, you had your piece of paper, you waved it, your mum was proud. What happened then?
Well, yeah, my mum was proud again, and came to yet another graduation ceremony in Welsh, which is different. Only used to do them in Latin. In University of Wales, they're done in Welsh, which adds a bit of flavour to the proceedings. I then had to get a job. We're all very clear at this point. I really needed to find a career.
Yeah.
I actually, of course, like most PhD students, wanted to be an academic. At the time, with the way government funding was, it was quite difficult to be an academic. There weren't many jobs available. They aren't exactly highly paid. And I ended up doing some casual work for my mother in her law firm. Mm-hmm. And as you've already said, she's a landlord and tenant lawyer.
Yeah.
And that ended up with me actually I was mostly dealing with IT systems and improving their computer systems, but eventually I got sucked into actually doing some law. And actually the skills are very transferable. The same skills you use to research a load of book and read a load of books and make arguments are not dissimilar skill sets to law. And I'm a voracious reader, so it was pretty easy for me to fairly rapidly acquire a fairly significant amount of knowledge. And at that point, I decided I would become a lawyer, not least because they're better paid.
Yes, there is that, yes.
I didn't particularly choose an area of law. It's just that my mother's firm did landlord and tenant law, so that's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Because it was there.
When you did it, did you find you enjoyed it, or were you?
Yeah, it's different from academia. I mean, you're still, because of the type of work I was tending to do, you're still doing quite a bit of research, and my career has been characterized by my academic background in that a lot of the work I've done has tended to have an academic side to it. So it's tended to be researching novel points of law, or doing something new, or writing a book. So a lot of it's been quite pulled by that. But then I've also had always had an interest in just operational structures and how you set things up to run effectively. And obviously aspects of all law firms are just process systems, but with skills on them. And so running a good process system is in itself important to running a good law firm, whether it's running a law firm that does landlord possession, which is relatively process driven, or whether you're running a more complex law firm, but you want to run all of your client onboarding and money laundering checks. They're all quite process driven things. So chunks of all law firms, like many businesses, are process-driven things. I've always been quite interested and good at that kind of stuff. So it's been a bit of both. Of course, I didn't have a law degree, so I had to do a law conversion course, which was 2 years part-time. And at that point, I unwisely perhaps wrote my first book. And that very much characterised my career, because it was a co-authored book on what was then the fledgling Housing Act 2004, which was not even in force in full at the time.
I remember that, yeah.
And when I had first seen the Housing Act 2004, it was obvious to me that it had a lot of quite radical stuff in it. And because it was so long, no one was very interested in it. People weren't really trying to think about it. And I started speaking about it and writing about it. And then I ended up writing this book about it. And of course, it has ended up characterizing my career. And indeed, of course, the sector, because you can't go anywhere now without talking about tenancy deposit protection, which was the first part that was introduced. And people started to take you very seriously when that got introduced. And of course, HMO licensing, which came a couple of years after tenancy deposit protection. But in some ways, and HMO selective licensing and rent repayment orders, and of course it's that's now created the new ability to have civil penalties. All of this springs from the 2004 Act, and because I was there on the ground floor writing one of the first books about it, nice people like yourself started calling me an expert. and it was a very slippery slope from that point onwards.
Are you happy with the way it went? Are you happy with that area of law? Do you wish you could have gone something else? I suppose you wouldn't say, really, but
well, I'm sure I would have been a great deal better paid if I'd gone and done
tax work,
tax law, commercial litigation, or international arbitration.
Yeah.
I always had this dream in my head I'd spend my life flying around the world doing law, but strangely there isn't much scope for that in what I do. Like, the furthest I've got to is Belfast and Glasgow. So I don't think there's much scope for travelling around the world within the context of what I do. So I should probably do what my wife was doing, which was international shipping arbitration, which might have had me travelling more exciting and exotic locations. But then, as against that, the really great thing about landlord and tenant law is its massive diversity. Lawyers in England and Wales particularly do tend to get very pigeonholed into one area of law, which actually I think is a bad thing. In America, you tend to find lawyers are much more diverse. Lord Neuberger, who was a former president of the Supreme Court, has actually criticised the UK's habit of sticking lawyers into quite small boxes and said lawyers should do more stuff. The great thing about doing landlord and tenant and property law is actually I've done quite a wide range of stuff, from civil litigation through criminal litigation, through advisory work, and I get to do quite a lot of different things, provided they're landlord and tenancy property related.
It's surprising how wide it is. I mean, I've been writing a blog on landlord and tenant law since 2006, and it's extraordinary that I've always been able to find things to write about in such a small area of law. There's lots of things I should have written about and hadn't because I didn't have time. I suppose it's very important because it's about people's homes and where they live. So
yeah, I think it really matters. I mean, people always say, "Oh, that sounds like a really." People often think of landlord and tenant law, and lawyers are quite snooty about it and think of it as a really unimportant piece of law. But you know, how many areas of law matter to absolutely everybody all of the time?
Yeah,
you know, I do a wide range of stuff, including boundary disputes and things around homeowners as well, and long leaseholder disputes. What I do literally touches on every single person in the country.
Yeah.
It's hard to say that about very many areas of law. You know, if you do international shipping arbitration, clearly what you do kind of touches on everybody because all of grain is shipped in that way, but it doesn't really interest or affect most people.
Not in the way that their home does.
Well, it's not in a very tangible way that their home does. So you know, there aren't many areas of law that you could legitimately say that every single person in the country has potentially got a reason to walk through your door, and I can say that, and I think that is fascinating. And you know, I get such a huge range of law. I've done everything from human rights law right through to crime and regulation. So literally everything. I've been very lucky in that regard, in that I've worked through a period of which the sector has really changed.
So David, at the moment we've got you at Payne Smith. You've taken the conversion course.